Hi everyone, and welcome to our Walk in My Shoes series for professional advisors, a series set up to bring you insight into the world of philanthropy and social impact investing. Our aim is to equip you with as much knowledge as possible to be in a position to give your clients the best advice you can around their impact journeys. Today, we are giving the floor to a few of the current tech platforms that are offering innovative solutions to giving as we explore the application of technology, connecting donors, philanthropists with charities, data driving the world of impact. Our chair for today's discussion is board member Cath Dovey, who is the co-founder of the Beacon Collaborative. Joining her, we have Sanjay Joshi, co-founder of SoGive, Billy Wright, a non-exec director of Brevio, another board member, Darshita Gillies from Maanch, and Dan Kwiatkowski, sorry, I should know better, freelance data scientist and fellow Newspeak House charity base. This is a strictly 30-minute session, but we do ask that you use the chat function to ask questions and interact as much as possible, and we will do our best to get to them. Please know that if we are unable to get to your question today, we will endeavour to answer offline, and these questions may help us shape upcoming topics. I will share my email in the chat for you. Thank you all for joining, and I will now hand over to Cath to make a start. Thank you, Cath.
Thank you so much, Sophia, and welcome everyone this afternoon. It's a pleasure to have you all here. So we have 4 panelists under strict time limits, which means I'm going to keep my comments to an absolute minimum. But technology in the philanthropy sector has become something of a hot topic in recent months. This issue of how do we connect donors or philanthropists with opportunities has never been more urgent, I think, than we've seen through the COVID crisis. And of course, it was mentioned in Danny Kruger's report to the Prime Minister recently that this is a real area where the charity and philanthropy sector really needs to be able to raise their game to create those efficient pathways to connect donors with funding opportunities and to support effective giving, not just giving, but effective giving. A number of different technology solutions have emerged in the recent months and in the last couple of years, and we are delighted to have 4 distinct offerings here today represented on the panel. They're going to have 5 minutes each to talk to you about what they do. And before I introduce them individually, I'd just like to suggest 4 questions for panelists to ponder and for our participants to ponder too. Firstly, why do we think philanthropy needs digital transformation? Be very interested in the panelists' thoughts on that question. Obviously, what do their solutions do? How can philanthropists and donors use them? And then lastly, what are some of the challenges that we're facing in the philanthropy sector today to create platforms for strategic giving? So without more ado, let me introduce one at a time each of our panelists, starting with the co-founder of SoGive, Sanjay Joshi. Sanjay, over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Cath. Very much appreciated. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with you today. So I'm just going to tell you about SoGive now. Now, imagine for a moment that you are able to get a rating on any charity, gold, silver or bronze, and that rating would tell you which charities do more or less good. Now just think about that for a moment, because if you're hearing that and thinking that it sounds almost unrealistically ambitious, then I think you're on the right tracks. I mean, just being able to say how much good a charity does is an almost impossibly difficult thing to do. And yet that is essentially the task that we are undertaking. So how do we do that? Well, a core part of that is data. If we're talking about how much good a charity is doing, how much impact are they making, that is a data-based question. And so we have a database. We gather that data from a number of different sources. There's a lot that can be said on that, but the long and the short of it is, that is one of the challenges. Getting enough data about impact that's credible, that's correct, that gets to the heart of the problem, that is tough. Another of our challenges is, how do you compare across very different areas? This is incredibly difficult. You know, how do we know how many human lives are equivalent to a chicken life? How do we compare lives saved versus suffering averted? These are phenomenally complex questions and a fascinating part of what we do. And another part of what we do is to enable advisors. So we offer this service in some ways directly to donors, but also we work with intermediaries as well, because it's incredibly important for anybody who's an advisor who's who's dealing with high net worth or moderately high net worth clients to be able to support them with their giving in an impact focused way. And so we help them with their thinking, and we'd like to talk about a specific journey that happens in going from a client's values through to their final giving decisions. So we go from values to cause areas to interventions to specific organizations. One of the things that advisors and other intermediaries often find that they are better able to focus on is knowing about specific organizations or maybe even interventions. But the hard part often is going from what are a client's values to what are the cause areas. We might know that they care more about animals or humans or people in the far future or people today or all of these things, but can we turn that into a cause area? Climate change versus dogs and cats in Battersea Dogs Home versus, you know, looking after veterans, etc., etc. And that's a tough problem. And again, this is part of what we can do using data and using analysis on that data. So I think I'm probably going to run out of time here. And if I'm going to allow the others any time, I'm going to pause here. Cath, I think you might be on mute.
Sorry, may I just ask one quick question, Sanjay? So you've given us a good framework there for what some of the challenges are, and the challenge of specifically working through the difficult donor journey that a philanthropist may have from values to actually making an investment. How could a philanthropist specifically use your platform? If they go on to your platform, what can they do?
So there's two ways that this can work. One of them is the sort of low effort, meaning low effort for the advisor, and one of them is it's a little bit more effort, probably for the advisor, but perhaps also for us as well. And that depends on exactly how that advisor wants to work with us. So low effort, this is probably particularly useful if the amount being donated is small. They can send that client directly to the SoGive site, and then that user can just go straight on and just search for a charity, find that charity, find not only the rating, gold, silver or bronze, but also the analysis that goes with it. For maybe a slightly more sophisticated case, maybe the donor is going to give more, then there is a sort of a value survey that can be done. And we can do that, or we can help the advisor to do that themselves if that's what they want to do. And then from there, you can use that to say these are the cause areas that matter or are most important given those values, and also all the way through to which are the highest impact interventions and giving opportunities.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sanjay. So there are two routes. The simple route, where you roughly know what you want and you can search and you get the rated solution. The more complex route that takes you through a survey that then leads you on a pathway towards those individual solutions. Brilliant. Thanks so much, Sanjay. Darshi, I'm going to hand over to you next, and we're strict on time, so your 5 minutes starts now.
Thank you, Cath. Hi everyone. This is Darshita Gillies from Maanch. I'll probably start with the first question of why technology in the space of philanthropy. And I grew up in Mumbai and in India particularly, and I know what it's like to live the life at the bottom 1%, where you don't have access to food, you don't have access to money to educate yourself. I think these challenges still exist in the Western, in the developing countries. But I think as a world, we also realize we have some systemic challenges, and developed countries are equally prone to some of these challenges. And a lot of the money that's being allocated towards these challenges needs to be philanthropic. It's not something that businesses will invest in, nor are some of the governments equipped to allocate budgets to some of these challenges. So taking a look at, this is 21st century, we have some localized issues, we also have some global issues. And if we want to use the power of philanthropic capital strategically, technology has a huge role to play in bringing together how this capital gets allocated, because the demand for capital is always going to be more than the supply. And therefore, technology can really come and enable ensuring that capital is supplied to the most impactful projects and really building a society that we want. And Maanch as a solution is designed to meet that need. And we designed it also around the Sustainable Development Goals, realizing that what we mean by global challenges and what it means to develop something that's global, we didn't want to get into the argument that I made it or you made it. So we adopted the UN SDG framework as the go-to framework as to what needs to be funded and what impact means to us globally, so that we take that equation of what is impact out from subjective conversations. And then we built a solution that really meets the need of the funders as well as the charities or the nonprofits, so that the solution that's built is seamless and is built around the needs and the challenges of both these stakeholder groups that are part of this process, as well as the intermediaries who facilitate that process. And the solution is not distinct. It's really the same thing, because impact is one thing. A funder pays as charity delivers, but in the end, together, jointly as a collaborative exercise, they deliver a unit of impact. And that's what we do through our interfaces. We give the participants of that ecosystem a view of what impact they've had as a solution. And then specifically going to the donors and how donors can use this. There are three things that we make happen. One is donors can go and find charities, and they can find it in a way that is meeting their criteria. If they want to fund by cause or by a particular sustainable development goal, they can find that. If they want to fund by amount, they can find that, and there are various other filters for geography and for other impact areas. So that's one, is donors can find projects. Second is donors give over a long period of time. So we give them a dashboard that allows them to aggregate all their giving to various initiatives that they have funded, so that they can then have a unified view of their funding. And the third is we also generate user reports. So we embed the M&E, the monitoring and evaluation. So it's not just that you find and fund, but if you want to know what actually happened, that gets reported back into your dashboard. So those are three things we help donors with. We also have a solution for wealth advisors, so that wealth advisors can enable their clients to get on the giving journey and provide a systematic or a systemized tool that enables them to feel comfortable with engaging on philanthropy with their clients. So again, it's the same dashboard, but just adding another player in the ecosystem, which is the wealth advisors, is also possible. And finally, I don't know if I have a minute, but the challenges on strategic philanthropy, if I have to just shed some spotlight on that, we actually did, we started hosting we have still, it's live, a COVID dashboard. And this was a first prototype of what collective or strategic philanthropy focused on strategic giving towards COVID could look like. And we have lots of learnings from that. But currently on the dashboard, we have global projects, global donors, and global projects still looking for funding. And what I would like to say is strategic giving, thematic giving, and collective giving is the way of philanthropy for the future, without doubt. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Darshi. So I'm taking away from that the ability to search a rich and deep database of global organizations through filters, the ability to get the long-term view on your portfolio, and the fact that you can do both local and global searches through the platform. Super. Thank you so much, Darshi. Dan, I'm going to hand over to you next at Charity Base.
Thanks. I'm just going to outline some of the issues that Charity Base is trying to address, and it starts with fragmented data. So I guess the biggest source of data on charities in this country is the Charities Commission, the regulator. and they do share a lot of their information that they hold on charities, which is good. But it's split between a few different sources. So you can download files from the Charity Commission. Up until recently, they had 2 different web platforms for searching the register. They also have a legacy API, which provides more information on charities. So it's good that they're sharing this information, but it's been a bit fragmented. And then there's other sources as well, other sources of data that's interesting for donors and philanthropists. So there's 360 Giving, which provides information on grants that charities have received and from who and when and what for. There's Companies House. So for charities, there's like 40 or 50,000 charities in this country which are incorporated as companies as well. So you can get interesting data from Companies House on them as well. And then obviously there's websites, the charity websites themselves will have a wealth of information about the charities and links to their social media platforms and other sources. And geographical data is another one. So given a charity's headquarters address, you can infer information about where they are and what that area is like. So that's the first issue, is that there's all this data, but it's kind of fragmented. And if you're trying to piece together an understanding of a charity, or doing due diligence or something, it's a laborious process to go through each of those sources and build up a picture. And aside from this issue of like fragmented data, there's also a lot of charities, right? So there's 170,000 registered in England and Wales, and searching through that all is a challenge. It requires like a lot of sifting out of information. So you might be interested in a specific niche. You might want to say, you want examples of charities that are based in Leicestershire, which spend more between 1 million and 10 million and work in the arts and maybe have funding from a particular foundation that you're interested in. That's quite a specific question, and the data is there, but traditionally that's been a hard question to ask. Google isn't going to help you out in that scenario. It's too specific a question, and there aren't easy ways to find that out. And then similarly, aside from finding specific charities that fulfill a criteria, you might want to do some analysis on the sector and get a bigger picture. So you might just want to say, throughout the whole country, a breakdown of each county, how many arts organizations are there in each county and how much money are they receiving? Questions like that, which are also hard to answer. So CharityBase started by trying to address the first question, which is this issue of data fragmentation. And what I did a few years ago was just pull together data from all those different sources that I mentioned, consolidate them into one database, clean them up, and I'm updating them regularly. So there's now just like a comprehensive database which I can use to find information on those charities. So that's great, and it served my purpose. And I was coming from the perspective of a small donor, but have since realised that this information is very relevant to lots of other people, including trusts, foundations, philanthropists. So I wanted a way to sort of share this database, and one option is just to publish it and people can download it and do what they want with it. But it's still a lot of information and it's hard to digest. So what I've done is build a layer of software on top of the database, which provides a powerful interface for querying that database. So you can answer questions like the examples I gave of a particular search, a very specific query. You can request that information in a split second, get back the structured data of charities in Leicestershire with that income range working on that particular topic. And similarly for the breakdown, you can aggregate charities throughout the whole country by a particular parameter, by constituency or local authority or something like that, or income range. There's quite a few things you can do. So yeah, that is the basis. There's also this web app. So on the website, if you go to CharityBase, there's a search portal, which is an example of something you can do with an API. It's not everything you can do with it, but it's an example of the kinds of search you can perform. And then that lets you also download a CSV of a particular search. So you can load that into a spreadsheet and look at it in Excel or something. And I think, examples and some use cases of the API may be particularly relevant. Some foundations are using it in the grants application process. So grants, it's typically you'll be receiving grant applications throughout a particular period, and then afterwards you'll review those applications which can be a laborious process of manually verifying data matches up to that from the regulators, or maybe you're supplementing it with data you have from elsewhere. One solution is basically using the API within the grants process, so that at the beginning you just say to the applicant, are you a registered charity, and if so, what's your charity number, what's your name? And
Dan, I'm going to have to cut you off in a minute. Do you want to just finish that example?
I'll wrap up there. Yeah. One solution is just that you use the API in this grants application process to pull the information into the form as the applicant is filling out the form, to have that verified information up front, so you don't have to waste their time in asking it over and over again, and you don't have to waste your time in reviewing applicants. So that's like one example of the API.
Super, thanks Dan. So what we've got with you is a brilliantly searchable database of every charity in the UK, pretty much. Thank you very much indeed. So Billy, I'm going to hand over to you last from Brevio. Hopefully we'll have a few minutes for questions at the end. If you can keep it to 5 minutes, that'd be fab.
I will, Cath. Thank you very much. So Brevio was established to address a very specific challenge that has been openly discussed across the third sector really since about the 1980s, but it's never really been addressed at scale. And that is the sort of inherent waste and inefficiency in the grant application and management sort of process. So by way of context, grant application forms or question sets, or however you'd want to think about them, typically contain anything from 20 to 200 questions. They're obviously duplicated quite substantially between different funding organisations. And as a charity, they typically take anywhere from 15 to 19 hours to complete for each application. And charities on average make around 22 grant applications per year. But in some cases, we know of charities that have actually made over 1,000 applications to funders in 1 year. And of that, around 66% fail. So if you look at that in terms of the cost to the industry, that means that the industry or the sector is investing about £1.1 billion per year in staff costs associated with the grant application process. And that £1.1 billion is just looking at registered charities, so it's excluding volunteers and trustees. It's obviously only looking at the costs for paid staff, and it's not looking at all at the costs for funders to review and process the application. So in reality, there's actually more time and effort associated with that. And if you look at that 66% failure rate of that £1.1 billion, and you end up with well over £700 million a year is being spent on essentially administration, which you could argue is not particularly focused and certainly doesn't lead to any impact on the ground. And that's about the same amount of money that the government has given to charities so far for COVID-19, and this is a spend that's annual, so very significant. So what Brevio does, it's not complex and it's not radical. It's actually an incredibly simple idea, and Brevio is a digital platform that matches charities to funders, or more specifically, it matches eligible charities to interested funders. So it really creates a digital platform, supply and demand, and makes the matches sort of both ways. So the platform is now live. As a charity, you create your profile and you only do it once, pulling in some of the information that Dan referenced sort of earlier and doing that in an automated way as far as possible. You then create your funding needs, which can be one funding need for core cost or unrestricted, or it could be multiple funding needs for different projects. And you make those, you make that available on the Brevio website. And as a funder, similarly, you create your profile, you create your funding criteria, and then what the platform does is it matches the demand, so the charity funding requirement, to the supply, i.e. the funder, and then informs both parties of that match. And obviously from a funder perspective, we're looking at philanthropists, we're also looking at trusts or working with trusts and foundations. We're also working with investment banks and wealth managers. And actually we've had probably the best and quickest impact, if you like, with, in fact, philanthropists and wealth managers, mainly because many of them are much more digitally savvy, if you like, than some of the other funders that we could work with, and therefore we've actually managed to make good traction. I like to think about two analogies for the Brevio platform. So you could think of it a little bit like UCAS, if those of you are familiar with the UCAS application process for students applying to university places. That was actually implemented way back in the 60s, but what it's essentially done is significantly reduce the waste and inefficiency in the university application process. Brevio does the same by matching charities to funders, but it actually does something which is a little bit more interesting. And the analogy there for me is really sort of digital dating apps. So what Brevio also does is it exposes charities to funders that they otherwise wouldn't necessarily have seen, and vice versa. So as a charity, you make your application on the platform, and you could have applied to one individual funder that you have already worked with or you're aware of. But in the process of doing that, the platform will show you, here's 5, 7, 10 additional funders that you may wish to work with that you haven't seen before, but your criteria match their criteria. Here's an application that you could potentially submit.
Thank you. Super. Thanks, Billy. So what we've got with you is by standardizing grant applications, you can effectively create a clearinghouse for charities and donors.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. So we've got just a couple of minutes left for questions, and I've seen a brilliant one that's come through from Lizzie on the chat function about the challenge of reviewing data over time. That what would normally be done through human interaction, watching transition within an organization, to apply that filter, I suppose, when thinking about whether it's getting better or getting worse, or needs to be reviewed in a slightly different way. How do you replicate that using filters? I'm going to go to you, Darshi, just simply because you talked more about filters when we first spoke.
Yes, thank you. I would answer this in two simple ways. One is technology will never replace human decision making, at least from my point of view, at least in the near term. And so the technology solutions are there to really augment the decision making process, not to take that away. And anything that was done prior in a mundane way, that's what technology helps with, is to automate mundane tasks, so you actually have more time to use your skills and bring more enhanced insight. And the second thing I would say on it's not just impact. Impact is just one component or one lens through which a decision is made. And I imagine for others as well, I'm speaking on behalf of all of you, that we're not just making panels based on the cause areas or specific topics. At Maanch, our solution is also holistic in terms of looking at overall due diligence process. The only thing we don't do at Maanch is we don't say which is good or which is bad. We leave it for the donors to decide by their own criteria.
Thanks, Darshi. I mean, what's very clear from all of you is that we're at a stage where you're able to compile data, albeit from very fragmented sources, so that for the first time, we've got the ability to review the landscape of charitable organisations, and to start thinking about how we can make decisions from that data. It's been fascinating to hear from all four of you. Thank you very much for taking the time to come and give us a few minutes on each of your offerings. I can see John is back. John, do you want to just pick up before we close this session?
Right. Well, thank you, Kath. That was great. And thank you, all of you, for contributing to this. This is sort of a bit of a change for our show, our Walk in My Shoes. It's more of a show and tell, so people can actually talk about their products and stuff. So I think it's neat. But the thing to keep in mind, that this is just a representative sample, and a good one, of people who are doing their work. But there's 360 Giving, there's BizGive, and there's many others as well, funders who do their own thing in some ways, or some with you, like community foundations or CAF or London Funders, etc. So we should keep in mind that these are really good examples, but there are others out there. So I'd like to maybe end on each one of you. I'm going to allow us to go over for a few minutes, 30 seconds. And Kath's such a good timer, she could time this. That was really well done, the timing that you did. Final words of wisdom that people can carry away from this whole thing. So Dan, shall we start with you?
Sure, yeah, I think I'll just reiterate what others have said, which is that, there's a wealth of data that largely already exists and is only improving, and that we should be using that efficiently to inform our decisions better and save time.
Okay, Billy.
I think the value of the data that Dan has talked about and everyone has talked about is only really going to scale when it becomes more connected and our insights are more sort of 360. And I think the danger at the moment is there's a lot of really good work, but it tends to be relatively siloed. So I think as a sector, trying to figure out better ways to work more collaboratively together would be where I would really like to try and push things.
I'd like to reinforce that because we're facilitating a group of, well, most of you are involved in it, to take a look at that whole issue. So we have everyone meeting around the table to try and solve that. So thank you for making that point. Sanjay.
I guess the one point I'd make is that if you, when you're advising your clients, are asking them, what are the cause areas that you care about, but you're not able to go to the next stage and say, what are the values that you care about, and then use analysis to get, and data analysis to get from there to which are the cause areas and so on, then we'd be absolutely overjoyed to help you, and we have the tools to make that work.
Okay, thank you. Darshi.
I have 3 words: let's engage, let's connect, and let's collaborate.
Excellent. And Cath, final word to you.
I think it's fantastic that we've, that all of you are aggregating this data for the first time. I think we've still got questions. We've got to think about how we use that, who's using it, and most importantly, that we're not leaving organizations behind because they don't provide as much data as others.
And I think one of the key issues around that is when you look at charities and enterprises, social enterprises and stuff, there's a real mixture in the ability to manage data and stuff. So there's a possibility that you get a lot of garbage in and you'll get garbage out. So we have to support charities in this whole process as well. So it's from both ends. Anyway, thank you very much, Dan, Darshi, Sanjay, Billy, and Cath for doing such a fabulous job. Over to you, Sophia, for final words.
Yeah, thank you all. That was really great. And I just want to let you guys know about an event we're having on Thursday, where we'll be looking at the power of funders, discussing the power balance between funders and fundees. I'm really excited for that one. And next week, we're back with Walking My Shoes, where we'll be looking at innovations in the funding into health. So once again, thank you all for coming. Thank you for your questions, and thank you, panelists, for your insight. Have a lovely week. Bye.